Hey everybody, this is PD from the Spin Rack. We also have
Alvin Ellis, ready to rock.
today we've been hearing this report that Jim Lee was almost back at the X-Men, and we've heard different stories. It always seems like they talk about it that Jim Lee was checking it out. But I found this thing from this site that we're gonna watch and then we're gonna comment later. Anything you want to first say before we start, since this was your idea?
Oh, let's hit the videotape.
All right, cool.
It turns out that last year, Marvel Studios was actively working on its X-Men reboot in not just the comics, but also, of course, its film. And they decided to go after famous artist Jim Lee. But unfortunately for Marvel, they could not secure him. So for those that might not be aware, Jim Lee is the man that made the X-Men relevant. Everything you love about the X-Men today, from the 90s cartoon to that iconic look to the best-selling comic of all time, X-Men #1, was all Jim Lee. Then, of course, like many other creators, he went off, they created Image Comics, and then eventually he wound up over at DC. Recently, Rob Liefeld revealed that last year, 2023, Jim Lee was talking to Marvel Studios and Marvel and Disney, and they wanted him on hand to reboot the X-Men for a new generation, the same way he rebooted them in the 90s. And this was apparently a giant, hey, we want you to work on the films. We want you from the ground up to just re-envision the X-Men. But things didn't work out, and for one reason or another, Jim Lee did not jump ship from DC to Marvel. Now, I think it's easy to probably figure out why he didn't. He's got more creative control at DC than ever before. And honestly, there was no need for him to leave. There's no need for Marvel to get him. I think that kind of would have just been a little redundant on both of their parts. Like, why leave DC when he's done such a great job? Why go to Marvel where they want you desperately to have your name on there so you can reboot it because they know you've done it once, but who's to say you're going to do it right the second time, right? And we've already seen that the current X-Men run is great and what they're setting up for the future. So I honestly think everything worked out, but it is interesting that they wanted him. And I think that's very telling of Kevin Feige and their plans. They've been saying for years now, when we do X-Men, it's going to be different and you're not going to be able to understand why we did this at first, but we're doing something new. This would have been new, and I get it, but to me, going back to the same well, not twice. It's already dried up once, so go frack somewhere else and go find another well and a bunch of water or oil or whatever you're looking for. So hopefully they find it.
All right, so what do you got to say about this?
I'm surprised you let that line go.
It was a lot. There was a lot of stuff. The end, the
I guess it was short.
reboot, X-Men.
I guess it was short enough to let it go. I'm surprised you let that line go. He said Jim Lee is the guy who made the X-Men relevant. You let that go?
I
Yeah.
let a lot of stuff go. I did let a lot of stuff go. He rebooted. He made them relevant, and well, we talked about it before, but there's a third one, but I'll get into that later. What are your thoughts about it? Yes, I
That's
let
like a
it go.
video. That's like a video of somebody saying John Byrne made Superman relevant. There was no good Superman before John Byrne. I'd be all over that thing. I'm shocked. No, so he loses credibility when he says something like that. For the record, Jim Lee did not make the X-Men relevant. That is going to have to go to, you guessed it, Chris Claremont, Dave Cockrum, John Byrne. Those are the guys who got the readership up to the point where we have the X-Men as we know them today, the second major powerhouse with Marvel Comics. It was not Jim Lee. However, Jim Lee made his bones on X-Men and was very well received with his art, inked by Scott Williams, no less, over the course of his artistic tenure on X-Men. And he's still very much beloved for those covers and for those interiors that he did on X-Men. However, didn't make him relevant. They have made them even more popular than they already were, thanks to his art, but didn't make him relevant. As for the other part, I was like, yeah, I think Marvel was pretty much chasing a ghost with that one. Jim Lee, well, it's funny too because the picture they always have that Jim Lee picture with Jim Lee with that smile looking like Crafty Fox. So he just looks like, yeah, sucker. Like, I'm not working for you. I got commissions to do over here. But it would be surprising because what he's intimating, or at least what I'm getting from it, is that Jim Lee was going to leave DC to go and work, like work for hire at Marvel. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. Not with the creative control, artistic control, and other perks that he has as part of DC's higher up hierarchy.
I think the idea of having him on both comics and film definitely made sense to me. I think for a person like Jim Lee, because even his initial thing from leaving X-Men is security. So he does X-Men. Obviously, he probably draws something. If you look at the card set he did, he's done all the characters. So he obviously understands the characters. He has some knowledge of them. And as a person being a director of the thing, whether it be the comics first, say that's, successful or successful with what he does for that, for that. He knows he's not a dummy. He knows that when he initially gets in for the film, he's going to be the same way the guy who did X-Men in '97. They do something initially with him, and then somehow he gets kicked out. And it's like, and next thing he has to go. There's some sort of thing. So I think the security is probably the reason why he didn't do it. But as far as the relevancy, I wanted to do like this. I think it was in the '90s. This was a X-Men action figure that came out a little bulkier than I would expect. But this is the classic costume, right? And when Jim Lee first got there, he put the X-Men in these costumes. When I first saw the girls in them, I'm like, all right, I get it. It's part of the what's that thing? The Shadow King thing. But it was a modified version of the original costume. I wasn't bothered with that. I was bothered with the guys, because you start here. This is where somehow people had a problem with the, what do they call it? The underwear on, over their pants. What about the thong over? Jim Lee had the X thong, and the guys had it too. So I can't. His redo of the original costumes went a little too far on that. But ultimately, as a creator, he definitely had a larger hand in the where the stories went at that period, because he was drawing them. So I think just a sense of security. I think it would work. I think having someone who had at least, because he was obviously an even big, I can say I'm a big X-Men fan, but he was a fan enough that he would say John Byrne and George Perez in his head all day while he was trying to draw. He got to the mountaintop. He became the guy. He was the guy who kind of put the X-Men on track, whether they're speculators or not. The book was going to sell bananas when he got there. I thought maybe since when he first got to Alpha, when I started seeing signs of him, being really good, and he had drawn the X-Men for a couple of bits, I was like, is he really interested? Because did the Punisher, and I was like, is he interested? Okay, he's doing Wolverine. Maybe he likes Wolverine and not the full X-Men. But then when he finally got to the book, you could see he had this. He did all the card set. I do feel he did a lot. So I don't think he really. No, actually, when they did Heroes Reborn, he did ask to do the X-Men at that point. So he does have, but that's only 6 issues. But I think Marvel is a little too much tumultuous. There's no chance that he would be able to take it on and Feige look and say, well, we just took a big name from DC that they know he does comic books. They don't know what he does. He comes to Marvel, fixes the X-Men, or at least the initial sales are crazy. Then he does a movie idea, and that's successful. But at the same time, Feige's like, but it's under the Marvel banner. He's like, no, this guy who's at DC, he made numbers of Heroes Return, X-Men's $1 million. DC's, what's his name? Jim Lee might be, they could almost, he could joke to himself saying, hey, Stan has said, I got a tape of Stan saying, I'm the son of Stan Lee. Put me in the movies. And then like the Marvel's guys like, no, we just wanted someone to get the numbers up, and now he's a movie guy. And Jim Lee at the same time being I wouldn't say a showrun, but an EP that would basically, in getting the X-Men running, I don't think they want anyone. I think that's why the Bo was a Bo DeMayo. Even though whatever he did, I think they really want the X-Men to be their success. And even though I feel the comic books and the movies need someone to usher these things in, they're not ready to give a property like that over to somebody. They like the idea of it, but something's gonna go left soon after the stuff gets done, and somehow he'll be out of thing. And that's why he didn't become editor-in-chief at Marvel, because that's what he wanted, and they were going to give it to him. But at the same time, what's the name? They say there's two stories. The stories that Rob Liefeld says is Jemis, before anyone knew Jemis was, killed Jim Lee becoming editor-in-chief. Jim Lee said the only thing that held up talks was Marvel wanted to pay me in stock. And I was like, well, you're going to buy my company in stock, and if you go bankrupt, then it's worthless, which is, basically what would happen. And he went to DC, and he's still been doing stuff. Now, we have other stuff we can talk about with Jim Lee, which is the commissions, which I'm not for, but I think giving him something like not a top editor at X-Men and EP on the movies, it's an easy thing for him because he knows all the characters, he knows the avenues he's left to do. So I think it would work. I just think there's no stability at Marvel for him to take it. He definitely would need some stability. And when they say, well, because I think that's what happened when the Image thing, what's the name? They said they wouldn't fly his mother out or something to the con. And that was the one thing that he kind of, addressed at the thing where he was like, what? Like, you sold 8 million. You're not gonna fly my mother out? So, that sort of thing. But, it's the buzz. I mean, when I heard Rob Liefeld talking about it, I thought they meant that, DC was thinking about getting rid of him. And then...
No, that's the better story. It should be like stupid comic book decisions. Not flying Jim Lee's mother. Like, are you stupid?
Yeah. No, it's I mean, Chris Claremont already bought a plane, so like at that period, that's before. I don't know. I think it was before. What's the name? Before the 8 million. So, it's crazy. Yeah. I mean, okay, but that's the thing. You're expecting big things out of the X-Men, not comic-wise. They got the new titles going on, and I don't know if there's a buzz or not to it, but they got a new relaunch to that. And Jim Lee did not do a reboot. He did a what was it? It would be not even a relaunch, not even close to a relaunch because it's still in continuity. He was just the new.
It wasn't a relaunch. It wasn't the best that you could call it was a renumbering. That did happen, but this was still in continuity. Okay? There was no even while it was on, there was no Age of Apocalypse type change or anything. This was just, hey, everybody really liked this guy's art on the X-Men. This that became the signature look for them, even going to the cartoons.
Yes. The outfits they did, which are not these ones. He had all of the new outfits they had, which they're using Cyclops's. No, I guess they used that same one in what's the name too in the cartoon early, the Cyclops with the strap and the X and whatnot. So definitely so. It's even though the people when the cartoon came out, he wasn't on the book, but it definitely had all those elements that we saw. Jean Grey's costume, Jean Grey not having the title of Marvel Girl, they just would have Jean Grey.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Yeah, so
once you could just have the superpowers, no mask, and you're going by your real name, it's really not a superhero anymore. There's no reason for the costume. Like, who's that? That's Jean Grey. Really?
Is that like what, like Mr. A, something like that? No, that's her real name, Jean Grey. Like what?
Well, that's it's because
Open the door for Bendis.
yeah. Well, that's the thing where yeah, no, that's definitely true too. Because you have I always look at the X-Men because the X-Men outside of when who's it? Who's that? Neil Adams decided to have Angel just have a mask so he could see his full face, even though the costume was cool. He should have probably gave him a mask, but at the same time, um, like Dave Cockrum, who is Mr. Legion of Superheroes at that period, came to the X-Men, and all of his X-Men characters don't have masks except for no Thunderbird. Thunderbird had a mask and he dies. So all the X-Men were now like similar, almost all besides Wolverine. And Wolverine got a costume without a mask because Chris Claremont was like, he's a great face. We need to see the face. Then when Byrne got there, like, do I have to? So Archie Goodwin, do I have to use this costume?
That costume, what costume was that? The costume from Wolverine #1, the all black costume?
No, the Fang one. You remember you saw the Fang one? The one that had the brown, but it had a stripe straight down, and he had like claw things.
Oh, that. Oh, that
Yeah.
wasn't. I thought that was like a reject outfit for Timberwolf from the Legion of Superheroes or something. I didn't think that was a real outfit. I thought that was part of some storyline where they were making fun of.
No,
I didn't
no,
realize that was real.
yeah,
Oh, okay. I didn't.
he was fighting. He was Chris Claremont, not fighting, but just saying he's got a great face. Can we just have? Can we see the face like the rest of the X-Men? And then and Dave Cockrum finally relented, and he drew it. And he gave it to Byrne, and he said, "Hey, it's a bitch to draw." And Byrne was like, "It was." And then he said, he asked Archie, "Do I have to keep this costume?" And then he said, "That's why you see in the not that costume, but that's why the black one he has, the patch one. That's when he got to do a costume and no mask. And each issue 17, they put him back in the costume. Oh,
Did
no,
you ever see?
issue 11, sorry.
Did you ever see the artwork for Herb Trimpe's original design for the Wolverine costume, where it's that fur thing with the?
I don't know. That you think that's true? I don't know
Yeah,
if that's true.
yeah, yeah. I think that's true because I
I
think a
don't
lot of
think
these.
that's
I
true.
think a lot of these cartoons, a lot of these comics. Look, that's just part of the love of superheroes. You get to see that type of stuff, but a lot of times the costumes are on the nose. Okay, it was like, hey, it's Wolverine. What are we gonna do? Make him look like a Wolverine? Pretty simple, right? No big deal. So
Hmm.
yeah, I would think that. I could see that one being right there, especially since I don't I don't know if there was an actual. I know there's a description of it. I've never seen actual Herb Trimpe pencils, so people could take license with it. But yeah, of that I'm pretty certain, especially when I've seen how some people look. That first design, like okay, like Black Panther when he's originally called Cold Tiger, and you can see
No,
how,
good
and
lord.
you see how busy that design is. Where it's like, okay, well, oh no, I have to, I have to control myself. I'm gonna go down the Stanley Jack Kirby debate again, but that right there is where an editor comes in and says, no, 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 this is just too busy. Cold Tiger, and aren't tigers only found in Asia? So it comes over. All right, let's streamline this out. Okay, we're just gonna go for all black, stripes on the gloves. We can keep some of the stuff and go with it. So it's for me, it's fun to see those original designs. So when I think of the Wolverine design, I know they make fun of it from time to time. I know I saw one recently just going around. It's like all fur with claws and then just like an open face. So even in those early days, they wanted to see his face. They were like, "Look at that kisser. We got to see this dude. We can't hide that mug. Look at him, beautiful."
And I, I don't. I know. I know Rob likes having the dissension, so DC can feel like
Did
you
you say
know.
dissension? Did you say dissension or deception?
Well, I think that's what he's trying to point out that Jim Lee is being deceptive to DC, but dissension is saying so DC feels like, oh, look what we did for him, and he's looking at Marvel, so he can do a Robservation. So I knew they were going to kick Jim Lee out.
When it comes to DC, and when it comes to DC, Rob Liefeld has been holding a grudge for decades,
Yeah.
and it's a grudge thanks to Mike Carlin and the experience that he had under Mike Carlin. because I've listened to him tell the story, and when I listened, I was like, man, Mike Carlin seemed to have been pretty hard on Rob Liefeld. And then I have to balance it out with what I've learned about Rob Liefeld. I'm like, Rob, you were probably taking some liberties that you weren't supposed to be doing, and Carlin was checking you on a regular basis, because that's what it seems like. He tried to like shoe in one little part where he was like, yeah, well, you know, I drew the faces and I redrew them from what Carl Kessel did because I wanted to do my faces. And then Carlini chews me out. I'm like, Mark, come on, Rob. You're not supposed to be redrawing these faces. You know that. This is like, isn't this the first work you're doing over there? You know you're not supposed to be doing that. But then he got bumped up. Oh, man. He was in the same position so many people want to be in. Like, hey, you know what? I don't got to work here anymore. Joke's on you, bitch. I'm out of here. I'm going to Marvel. That's where he ends up making his bones. And the rest is history at the end of the day. But it seems that he's always bore a grudge with DC since then, and he loves to do his, by decade prediction that DC is going to go belly up and go strictly to reprints. He does that like about every 5 years.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. There's a different mentality when it comes to creators because, you know, George Paris's biggest detractor when he got to Marvel was Marv Wolfman. It's like this guy just doesn't get it. It just and it's the point where Marv turned was the White Tiger picture with him jumping over the buildings. Mm-hmm. It's like, yes, that's how you get something in that's perspective. That now you're getting it. And from there, of course, they built a relationship. But it's like early on, because I think he also points out that Carlin was wrong about his issue 4, because he was doing something that Eric Larson did. So he had it all redrawn. And that is the office politics thing. But at the same time, when you're a newbie, you're going to get some tough love. Sometimes the editorial can be wrong about certain things, but it's not proof of Carlin is this big like this. He doesn't like Carlin, doesn't like Mike Richardson. Says something with Mike from Dark Horse. It's something about this guy. You know, I wasn't. You know, that's why we didn't go to him because I thought I had some issues. He was not. I don't think he said. I'm not sure exact words, but he's like. But I wasn't sure. But then he said I wanted to go with it was Dave Albrecht. He said from Malibu. He said I want to go because we could push them around. He's like. Just say that. But yeah, it just feels like he likes the idea. Let's put this story out. DC will feel kind of like they the hot girl is talking to somebody else, and we did all this stuff for him, and he's not working. Let's see if we can get him to work more for us. Or if he's going there immediately, like, look, these guys, he could get fired tomorrow. Why wouldn't you take a meeting? Like, what else can you do? He could get kicked out tomorrow, and Rob will be talking about it. So ultimately,
they're not kicking out Jim Lee. Jim Lee may leave if he gets a better offer. You know, I can understand that, but Jim Lee is one of the few, the last living legit comic book greats. He just is. This guy is better on his laziest day than 99% of the guys out there. It does absolutely nothing. It does absolutely nothing for Jim Lee to be kicked out of Marvel. I mean, do you remember what was the last thing he did for DC that was his own idea?
I thought it was. They said the last thing he did was a Suicide Squad, a couple pages, but there was a Time Men thing, wasn't it? Like a.
Did you read Scooby Apocalypse?
Yes, yeah.
That was Jim Lee. That whole thing was Jim Lee. And when I found that out, I was just like, huh? Because I know he did like a cover, but I'm used to seeing Jim Lee do a cover here and a cover there, that type of stuff to stoke some interest, get the ball rolling. But then I found out like the story idea, the initial story, that was all Jim Lee. You're not doing that in Marvel. So you're not today. It's not happening. But he had the clout where like, look, I got this idea, and they were doing different stories with those Warner Brothers properties where you had Scooby. You had Scooby Apocalypse doing something. You had something with Johnny Quest. wacky racers, Snagglepuss. They were doing these different things with them. So he's like, okay, and that was one of the more successful ones because that was a 3-issue run. That was a 3-year run, 36 issues. So that's where I try to balance it out with where, okay, you got the time, as much as I tease them about it, you got the time to do commissions. Okay,
That's where I'm going.
If you have the idea to do one of these stories, it's going to get greenlit. It's going to get greenlit. I mean, he had certain ideas that he wanted for Wonder Woman and for Superman. Realized those happened, weren't necessarily the best, but those happened. And then you have to weigh that as like, okay, am I going to get that at Marvel? From where I'm looking right now, the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I mean, right now it's a pretty cushy thing. He survived the whole thing with Dan Didio leaving, so that doesn't interrupt his 4-day nap schedule. So he's going to be just fine.
Wow, I would say I was a big, especially with Pat Olaf drawing it. I was a big fan of those issues of Scooby Apocalypse. The only problem is that Jim Lee needed to put his Jack Kirby hat on, and when Jack Kirby does animals, they almost operate as humans. So he needed to really have those Scooby moments, because Scooby had sort of in the cartoon had a lot to do, and I think as far as the writers are going, they didn't really factor in Scooby doing so much because they were doing more realistic of just having a Great Dane be there. And I think they should have figured having like some of those like devil dinosaur scenes or lockjaw scenes where you see the animal doing stuff that's like, is a little, and obviously Scooby was smarter for the humor portion of it, but since they were doing the apocalypse stuff, they should have had some cool Great Dane scenes for Scooby to do. So you got a fun concept, you got some great art, that turned, obviously did a ton of fans for, I forget what it was, Velma, but they got, Daphne is extra hot on this thing. So, do something with Scooby too. but yeah.
No, it was definitely a departure from what we would know as the Scooby Gang.
Yeah.
But it was 36 issues. I'm just waiting. I'm looking at this and I'm like, eventually they're going to adapt this. So I just look at the whole thing like that's just a matter of time because it was a really good take on these particular characters. I mean, we're totally off the original subject, but Scooby
still Jim Lee. Still Jim Lee.
Yeah, it's true. Still Jim Lee.
For us, it's a first.
You have to say like where's the creative equivalent if you went to Marvel that would have been able to do that, because Marvel doesn't own Disney. Disney owns Marvel. There's a totally different thing where Warner Brothers will come over here and like, yeah, we want our properties to cross with the DC characters, because periodically they do these team ups with Bugs Bunny, Superman, Tasmanian Devil, Wonder Woman. You'll have they'll do the covers as well with the Warner Brothers, with the Looney Tunes characters, those type of things. Then they brought in all the stuff with the Hanna-Barbera characters. So they will do this, periodically to make certain that these characters stay out, that they're still being published, that they still get into the public eye one way or another. Marvel as a Disney acquisition is still very new, and they just started doing some of this type of stuff with the What If. They're using like Donald Duck for some what if stories. What if Donald Duck became Wolverine? What if Donald Duck became Thor? And since I'm a big Donald Duck fan, I picked those up. But then I would still have to ask, where's the equivalent that you would have been able to do? And then again, 3 years, a 3-year run. Modern days, that's good. For something like, for this particular idea, it's going to get greenlit and you're going to get proper support behind it as well. Had variant covers, all of that type of stuff. So those are things, if you're still a creative, those are things you're going to take into account, because I can't believe he would move just for the money, because DC could always match like, whoa, no, we want you to stay. How much money? Yeah, we can match that. That's not a big deal. The creative aspect is going to be something that would have to entice him away. I don't see that coming from Marvel, not right now.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a thing too. And at the same time, being able to look from the side view and say, I know what we're going through. Am I going to go into this hornet's nest over here for X amount of money, and then they then put all the blame on me. You know, and I go, I'm like, it's the deal that you don't really necessarily want to sign up for without knowing. I think if they would have gave them some sort of security, which they can't. If you're connecting with film, there's no real chance of you know, them saying that them having someone they if we wouldn't go through what we're going through with Marvel, if they didn't look at these properties and say, oh, so Jon Favreau, he had a good handle, and Josh Whedon and the Russo's brothers, they had a good handle, and James Gunn has a good handle. Now we're gonna pick the guys, and here's our format, and then you just put your look. You can put anything in the production design you want, but this is a story you're doing, and you got people leaving, like Edgar Wright in the Ant-Man thing. So it's like knowing that they can talk to you about you're gonna have these things, but at the same time, you also know Stan Lee was involved for years, and if given the right opportunity, and have to be, you know, not have to be, hey, I'm gonna lose my job if I tell the truth about Dolph Lundgren's Punisher. I'm gonna say that, hey, wait till you guys see the Punisher. What else could you do? Like, he's in there, he's the top guy, and if he doesn't have any new ideas, the ideas that he had one translated in the Hulk, and Spider-Man, that was a couple specials, but you could tell, all right, it didn't necessarily work to the extent that he wanted, where the Hulk had multiple seasons. Spider-Man's gonna work, and then Spider-Man, of course, works. So it's like, if I keep peddling these same things that I worked on, is when the things work, they're gonna work at some point. But at the same time, you know, being able to know, you know, obviously know Stan always called him his son and whatnot. So like knowing that that's having to be. I mean, he did it. He was going into, what was it, Nightcat? But he did it for DC too. Nightcat, whatever he did the design for Nightcat, oh yeah, that's gonna be great. Went to Catwoman with Halle Berry, hey, this is gonna be great. So he knows the tumultuous thing that can happen more so at Marvel. But
and he did the art on the Catwoman comic book adaptation of that film.
So see,
it goes to show Jim Lee, team player.
yes, definitely. So if you have someone like that, I think, you know, it's about, obviously he's got a family, he's got a lifestyle, but he also, you know, he would love security and don't want some place where he's in there. He builds it up and then they tear him down. So I guess that's about it. Any other things?
No, I think we covered it all.
All right, Spinner Rack.
Hey, we're out.
We're out.